Alrighty, and live. Testing. 1, 2, 1, 2. Check the audio. Testing. Okay, it's coming in. Alright, this is the Chapter 7 recap taken directly from litcharts.com. And it should serve somewhat of a reminder and serve also as somewhat of what we read in Chapter 7 and what we were about to read in Chapter 8. Colonel Aureliano Buendia is taken prisoner 2 weeks before the end of the war. Marquez accompanies him at the final moment of defeat. Condo with his hands bound, accompanied by an officer. Large crowds gather to watch his return. Ursula visits Colonel Aureliano Buendia in jail. He knows all that has gone on in Macondo because of his psychic abilities, even saying that he believes he's been sentenced to death in this way before, too. He gives his poems to his mother and makes her promise to burn them, where she has smuggled in. Colonel Aureliano Buendia thinks back to the time of the war, remembering how the enemy had tried to trap him, but he uses his premonitions to protect him. On another occasion, his close friend, Colonel Magnifico Obispo, had been stabbed to death a few yards from him, and he had no idea. When he was sentenced to death, he had a premonition that made him ask that sentence be carried out in Macondo. In Macondo, the soldiers delay the execution, fearful of the crowd's rebellion. Kind of strange that he can tell the future, but he can't detect when someone's being stabbed to death near him. Yeah, kind of strange in a way. Like it's like his strength is a weakness in some ways. The authorities spend the night at Caterino's store, but no one will sleep with the captain because they are sure he will die soon. Word arrives that Colonel Aureliano Buendia must be killed in the next 24 hours. The guards lead him through the street and stand him against the wall to the cemetery. Colonel Aureliano Buendia has a vision of his father leading him to ice. He's Jose Arcadio I crossing the street with his shotgun. He orders them not to shoot, and another war begins. The soldiers leave with Colonel Aureliano Buendia to free the revolutionary leader in Rio Hacha. I believe Arcadio Jr. died in the previous chapters. Just Arcadio. I can't quite remember. They make their way to them by showing them the small goldfish. When they approach Rio Hacha, they determine that the revolutionary leader has been shot, and the troops declare Colonel Aureliano Buendia their leader. By the time he's gathered an army of 2,000 well-armed Indians, the Liberal Party has rejected him as their leader, and the national government deems him a bandit. He returns to Macondo to establish his headquarters there and is greeted by Colonel Hermeneldo Marquez. Ursula is taken in Santa Sofia de la Piedad and her daughter and twin sons, born several months before. The girl's name is Remedios. The boys are named Jose Arcadio II and Aureliano II. Surprised there were no Arcadios. I guess there is if you count Jose Arcadio II. Yeah, I guess that is the Arcadio. Anyway, yeah. Cycles. Characters keep naming their sons and daughters after themselves. Flight. Jose Arcadio I and Rebecca have in the home that Arcadio had built for his family. One day, returning home from working the land, Jose Arcadio is shot in his bedroom. Rebecca says she was in the bathroom and heard nothing. A trickle of blood leaks under the door and runs all the way across town to Ursula in the Buendia house. Ursula follows the trail all the way to the dead Jose Arcadio, though no wound can be found on his body. His body holds the scent of gunpowder remaining even after he's buried. Who fired the shot, though? Doesn't quite say. Lieutenant McConnell Aureliano Buendia holds power because of his 5,000 troops. Different. He believes the war is at a stalemate. Colonel Aureliano Buendia asks Pilar Ternera to read him his future. If Aureliano himself has premonitions, I'm not sure why that would be necessary, but maybe he just wants an outside opinion. She warns him to watch out for his mouth. Though she can't explain further, 2 days later he drinks poisoned coffee. But Ursula nurses him back to health. Ursula tells him she did not burn his poetry as he requested. He starts writing again. If there's one thing I hate, it's vague predictions. Watch out for your mouth can mean two things. Like watch what you eat or watch what you say. And yeah, it could have been hard for him to determine what her true meaning was based on the ambiguity of her prediction. He is a revolutionary, so it's possible he did believe her to mean what he said. Colonel Aureliano Buendia asks his friend Colonel Ronaldo Marquez why he's fighting. His friend responds that he's fighting for the Liberal Party. Colonel Aureliano Buendia says that he has just realized that he's fighting only for pride. Colonel Aureliano Buendia says that knowing this is better than not knowing why one is fighting or fighting for an empty cause, like Colonel Ronaldo Marquez. Colonel Ronaldo Marquez, the civil and military leader of Macondo, rebel groups in the interior. Colonel Ronaldo Marquez establishes an atmosphere of rural peace. Colonel Ronaldo Marquez fell in love with Amaranta before his return. Ursula advises Amaranta to marry him, but Amaranta refuses, saying he'll be shot sooner or later. Indeed, the government threatens to shoot him if the rebel. Amaranta accuses him of loving Colonel Aureliano Buendia so much that it has caused him to want to marry her. He says he will continue insisting. Like family relation. He loves her by association. That's what she's saying. But I don't think Amaranta would go for him anyway because she is atoning for her rejection of Pietro Crispi and the fallout of that. She's tied a bandage around her hand after burning her hand on coals to remind herself to remain celibate. As a penalty, she's assessed on herself for indirectly killing Pietro Crispi. Pietro Crispi took his own life after she rejects him. A letter arrives from Colonel Aureliano Buendia advising Ursula to take good care of Jose Arcadio Buendia because he's going to die. Ursula believes it is a premonition. It takes 7 men to move him inside to a bed. The next morning, he's returned himself to the chestnut tree. Jose Arcadio Buendia communicates with and is cared for mostly by the ghost of the man she killed. Written incorrectly. Typo here because it's man she killed. I don't remember. Oh, I see. Yeah, the man he killed. Jose Arcadio Buendia is the one who killed Prudencio Aguilar very early in the book. I think it was the first chapter because he made some sort of remark about Ursula. Like I don't know, he can't make her happy in the bedroom or something like that. He spends much of his day dreaming of infinite rooms that he returns to again and again. Jose Arcadio Buendia is found dead in bed soon after. Yellow flowers rain from the sky. And that is the end of the Chapter 7 recap. Let's go into Chapter 8. Sitting in the wicker rocking chair with her interrupted work in her lap, Amaranta watched Aureliano Jose, his chin covered with foam, stropping his razor to give himself his first shave. His blackheads bled, and he cut his upper lip as he tried to shape a mustache of blonde fuzz. When it was all over, he looked the same as before, but the laborious process gave Amaranta the feeling that she had begun to grow old at that moment. He looked just like Aureliano when he was your age. Well, mild confusion. Again, Aureliano names his son Aureliano Jose. Let's see. She must be referring to Colonel Aureliano Buendia. Yeah, his father. He had been for a long while, ever since that distant day when Amaranta thought he was still a child and continued getting undressed in front of him in the bathroom as she had always done. As she had been used to doing ever since Pilar Ternera had turned him over to her to finish his upbringing. The first time that he saw her, the only thing that drew his attention was the deep depression between her breasts. He was so innocent that he asked her what had happened to her. Amaranta pretended to dig into her breasts with the tips of her fingers and answered. Sometime later, when she had recovered from Pietro Crispi's suicide, Ana Jose again, he no longer paid attention to the depression, but felt a strange trembling at the sight of the splendid breast with their brown nipples. He kept on examining her, discovering the miracle of her intimacy inch by inch. And he felt his skin tingle as he contemplated the way her skin tingled when it touched the water. This is his aunt, by the way. Ever since he was a small child, he had the custom of leaving his hammock and waking up in Amaranta's bed, because contact with her was a way of overcoming his fear of the dark. But since that day, when he became aware of his own nakedness, it was not fear of the dark that drove him to crawl in under her mosquito netting, but an urge to feel Amaranta's warm breathing at dawn. Early one morning, during the time when she refused Colonel Herrineldo Marquez, Aureliano Jose awoke in the feeling that he could not breathe. He felt Amaranta's fingers searching across his stomach like warm and anxious little caterpillars. Pretending to sleep, he changed his position to make it easier, and then he felt the hand without the black bandage, diving like a blind shellfish into the algae of his anxiety. Although they seemed to ignore what both of them knew and what each one knew that the other knew, from that night on, they were yoked together in an inviolable complicity. Yeah, she's taken a vow of celibacy, and even if she didn't, that's her nephew. So just keep that in mind. Aureliano Jose could not get to sleep until he heard the 12 o'clock waltz on the parlor clock. The mature maiden, whose skin was beginning to grow sad, did not have a moment's rest until she felt slip in under her mosquito netting that sleepwalker whom she had raised, not thinking that he would be a palliative for her solitude. Let's see, palliative. Relieving pain. Like sedative, yeah. Later, they not only slept together naked, exchanging exhausting caresses, but they would also chase each other into the corners of their bedrooms at any hour of the day in a permanent state of unrelieved excitement. They were almost discovered by Ursula one afternoon when she went into the granary as they were starting to kiss. Again, disturbing. Put it bluntly, disturbing. But let's see, is there anything else? There was something else I wanted to say, but I think I forgot what it was. Yeah, it's like they keep naming their sons and daughters after themselves, and that causes them to forget. Like, a phrase that I've used before is confused lineage. Like, people forget who they're related to. I think it was Arcadio Jr. who said, like, I'm not a Buendia. In reality, his grandfather was Jose Arcadio Buendia. And people were against Jose Arcadio Sr. of getting married to Rebecca because they thought it was brother and sister getting together, but that wasn't the case at all. Rebecca was adopted. So it's like people don't really know who's related to who, and it results in like Amaranta trying to get with Aureliano Jose when she should know her brother's name. You should know. It's not like Pilar with all of her sons and daughters that she doesn't know which is her kid. It's the name. It's all in the name. Do you love your aunt a lot? Yeah, even more disturbing, she knows. She asked Aureliano Jose in an innocent way. He answered that he did. That's good of you, Ursula concluded and finished measuring the flour for the bread and returned to the kitchen. Let's see, I think it was Ursula that said that. It's kind of confusing with how it's written. Like, it leads you to believe that Amaranta is the one saying that, but I believe actually it's Ursula who said that. Yeah, it's Ursula who said that, sorry. But even still, it's like, maybe she doesn't know what's happening in her house, Ursula. The episode drew Amaranta out of her delirium. She realized that she had gone too far. She was no longer playing kissing games with a child, but was floundering about in an autumnal passion, one that was dangerous and had no future. She realizes their relationship, but the question is, does Amaranta? Aureliano Jose, who was then finishing his military training, finally woke up in reality and went to sleep in the barracks. On Saturdays, he would go with the soldiers to Caterino's store. He was seeking consolation for his abrupt solitude, for his premature adolescence with women who smelled of dead flowers, whom he idealized in the darkness and changed into Amaranta by means of the anxious efforts of his imagination. A short time later, contradictory news of the war began to come in. While the government itself admitted the progress of the rebellion, the officers of Macondo had confidential reports of the imminence of a negotiated peace. Toward the 1st of April, emissary identified himself to Colonel Herrinello Marquez. The second time war was broken out in Macondo. I can't really remember why the first one had something to do with the establishment of political parties, like the liberals and conservatives. And they went to war, and then that war ended, and then another war started after Jose Arcadio was shot. And I don't know if it was directly because of that or related to that. It might have been because of that. Okay. He confirmed the fact to him that the leaders of the party had indeed established contact with the rebel leaders in the interior and were on the verge of arranging an armistice in exchange for 3 cabinet posts for the liberals, a minority representation in the Congress, and a general amnesty for rebels who laid down their arms. I kinda am. I find it somewhat tedious, and I'm somewhat annoyed that Gabriel Garcia Marquez included all this political stuff in the book. I think it's for a reason because it's based in history in South and Central America with those governments, but like politics are messy as heck. And that carries over into the story. Who has what party affiliation, who deal, value, belief. Like, it's somewhat confusing. Much like the family itself. Maybe that's why you put it in. Because it's like the family, their generations and lineage is confusing, as is all of the progress initiatives and the developments of civilization are also confusing, messy, tangled too. The emissary brought a highly confidential order from Colonel Aureliano Buendia, who was not in agreement with the terms of the armistice. Colonel Herrinello Marquez was to choose 5 of his best men and prepare to leave the country with them. The order would be carried out with the strictest secrecy. 1 week before the agreement was announced, in the midst of a storm of contradictory rumors, Colonel Aureliano Buendia and 10 trusted officers, among them Colonel Roque Carnicero, stealthily arrived in Macondo after midnight, dismissed the garrison, buried their weapons, and destroyed the records. By dawn, they had left town, along with Colonel Herrinello Marquez and his 5 officers. It was such a quick and secret operation that Ursula did not find out about it until the last moment when someone went to see Colonel Aureliano Buendia. Come to the door right now. I mean, it's kind of funny. Like the head of state like ducking out. Like the head of state steps down because there's a lot of like upheaval or whatever political division in the country. And as a matter of fact, there were even some conspiracy theories stating that like that was Hitler too, like Argentina or something, and he never actually died. He was like, it's like that's a conspiracy theory. The official version is that he shot himself in the bunker. Okay. Ursula jumped out of bed and went to the door in her nightgown, and she was just able to see the horsemen who were leaving town gallop off in a mute cloud of dust. Only on the following day did she discover that Aureliano Jose had gone with his father. 10 days after a joint communique by the government and the opposition announced the end of the war, there was news of the first armed uprising of Colonel Aureliano Buendia on the western border. His small and poorly armed force were scattered in less than a week. During that year, while liberals and conservatives tried to make the country believe in reconciliation, he attempted 7 other revolts. One night he bombarded Rio Hacho from a schooner, and the garrison dragged out of bed and shot the 14 best-known liberals in the town as a reprisal. For more than 2 weeks, he held a customs post on the border. From there, sent the nation to call a general war. Another of his expeditions was lost for 3 months in the jungle in a mad attempt to cross more than 1,000 miles of virgin territory in order to proclaim war on the outskirts of the capital. One occasion, he was less than 15 miles away from the mountains, very close to the enchanted region, also the Spanish galleon many years before. Visitacion died around that time. She had the pleasure of dying a natural death after having renounced a throne out of fear of insomnia. And her last wish was that they should dig up the wages she had saved for more than 20 years under her bed and send the money to Colonel Aureliano Buendia so that he could go on with the war. Ursula did not bother to dig it up because it was rumored in those days that Colonel Aureliano Buendia had been killed in a landing near the provincial capital. The official announcement the 4th in less than 2 years was considered true for almost 6 months because nothing further was heard of him. Suddenly, when Ursula and Amaranta had added new mourning to the past period, unexpected news arrived. Colonel Aureliano Buendia was alive, but apparently he had stopped harassing the government of his country and had joined with the victorious federalism of other republics of the Caribbean. He would show up under different names, farther and farther away from his own country. Later, we learned that the Federalist forces of Central America in order to wipe out Alaska to Patagonia. The first direct news that Ursula received from him in several years after his departure was a wrinkled and faded letter that had arrived, passing through various hands from Santiago, Cuba. I think it's also confused and convoluted because that's the way political power is. Like a lot of the elements of the Constitution, I think, are that way for the same reason. Like it's government. Trump said famously, it's like drain the swamp. Like it's a swamp for a reason. Like they don't want people like transferring power from the rich, privileged elite to the poor. It's the greatest crime of capitalism, in my opinion. But anyway, we've lost him forever. Ursula exclaimed on reading it. If he follows his path, he'll spend Christmas at the ends of the earth. The person to whom she said it, who was the first to whom she showed the letter, was the conservative General Jose Raquel Moncada, mayor of Macondo since the end of the war. This Aureliano, General Moncada commented, "What a pity that he's not a conservative." Again, does he mean junior, senior? I would be very surprised if he was saying that about senior. because he's been fighting like as a revolutionary this entire time. Really admired it. Like many conservative civilians, Jose Raquel Moncada had waged war in defense of his party and had earned the title of general on the field of battle, even though he was not a military man by profession. On the contrary, like so many of his fellow party members, he was an anti-militarist. He considered military men unprincipled loafers, ambitious plotters, experts in facing down civilians in order to prosper during times of disorder. Intelligent, pleasant, ruddy-faced, a man who liked to eat and watch cockfights, he had been at one time the most feared adversary of Colonel Aureliano Buendia. Again, you're fighting with one of the Aurelianos, so you know he's not a conservative. He must have been meaning the junior, I'm thinking. He succeeded in imposing his authority over the career officers in a wide sector along the coast. One time, he was forced by strategic circumstances to abandon a stronghold to the forces of Colonel Aureliano Buendia. He left 2 letters for him. In one of them, quite long, he invited him to join in a campaign to make the war more. Who lived in liberal territory, and he left it with a plea destination. From then on, even in the bloodiest periods of war, the 2 commanders would arrange truces to exchange prisoners. They were pauses with a certain festive atmosphere, which General Moncada took advantage of to teach Colonel Aureliano Buendia how to play chess. They became great friends. They even came to think about the possibility of coordinating the popular elements of both parties, doing away with the influence of the military men and professional politicians, setting up a humanitarian regime. Who, that would make the world a better place. Who would want that? He wore civilian clothes, replaced the soldiers with unarmed policemen, enforced the amnesty laws, and helped a few families of liberals who had been killed in the war. He succeeded in having Macondo raised to the status of a municipality, and he was therefore its first mayor. He created an atmosphere of confidence that made people think of the war as an absurd nightmare of the past. Father Nicanor, consumed by hepatic fever, was replaced by Father Colonel, whom they called the Pup, a veteran of the First Federalist War. Bruno Crespi, who was married to Amparo Mascote, and whose shop of toys and musical instruments continued to prosper, built a theater which Spanish companies included in their itineraries. It was a vast open-air hall with wooden benches, a velvet curtain with Greek masks, 3 box offices in the shape of lions' heads, through which mouths the tickets were sold. It was all about that time that the school was rebuilt. It was put under the charge of Don Melchor Escalona, an old teacher brought from the swamp, who made his lazy students walk on their knees in the lime-coated courtyard with the approval of their parents. That's Bruno Crespi, the brother of the deceased Pietro Crespi. Aureliano Segundo and Jose Arcadio Segundo, the willful twins of Santa Sofia de la Piedad, were the first to sit in the classroom with their slates, their chalk, their aluminum jugs with their names on them. These are the kids of the deceased Arcadio. The one who died, I think, two or 3 chapters ago. I think he was the ruler of Moncano for a brief time too. Arcadio was, but he was the despotic, like Fidel, not Fidel. Maybe kind of like Fidel, kind of like Benito Mussolini. Like he was so mean, people liked it when he died. Like, yay, he's gone. Remedios, who inherited her mother's pure beauty, known as Remedios the Beauty. And actually, what's funny about that is these are the kids that are there because of Pilar Ternera. Pilar is actually Arcadio's mom. And he was trying to sleep with his mom, and she, like, arranged for him to have sex with Santa Sofia de la Piedad so she wouldn't have to. Like, another, like, kind of ridiculous thing in this book. Again, Pilar's, like, she's having all kinds of kids. All kinds. Again, she, like, loses track of who's actually her son. Okay. Okay. In spite of time of these superimposed periods of mourning and her accumulated afflictions, Ursula resisted growing old. Aided by Santa Sofia de la Piedad, she gave a new drive to her pastry business, and in a few years not only recovered the fortune that her son had spent in the war, but she once more stuffed the pure gold the gourds buried in the bedroom. As long as God gives me life, she would say, there will always be money in this madhouse. That was how things were. Troops in Nicaragua signed on as a crewman on the German ship, appeared in the kitchen of the house, sturdy as a horse, as dark and long-haired as an Indian, with a secret determination to marry. This is her nephew, by the way. Which I don't know why Ursula's not trying to prevent that, but I don't know, maybe she forgot or something. There's so many people who go in and out of this house. She's like, who are you again? who are you a relation to? And she's like, how old is Ursula at this point? She's like got to be the fourth generation at this point, right? Let's see, 1, 2, let's see, 1. Yeah, so she'd be the first generation. Second generation would be Colonel Aureliano Buendia. Third generation would be Aureliano Jose and Arcadio. Now all of them, Arcadio, that would be the third generation, and then fourth generation would be their kids who are now in school. So yeah, she's like straight up a great grandma of those kids who were in the school. Yeah, she's pretty dang old. Okay. Amaranta saw. Let's see. Did I already skip that? Okay, no, I didn't. When Amaranta saw him come in, even though he said nothing, she knew immediately why he'd come back. At the table, they did not dare look each other in the face. But 2 weeks after his return, in the presence of Ursula, he set his eyes on hers and said to her, I always thought a lot about you. Amaranta avoided him. She guarded against chance meetings. Yeah, it's like Amaranta tends to reject and push people away. She rejected Pietro Crispi. She rejected, what was the dude's name? Herrineldo Marquez. Was it Herrineldo Marquez? I think it was Herrineldo. Yeah, Herrineldo. Now she's rejecting Jose Aureliano Jose. Although in his case it makes even more sense because again she's actually a blood relation to him. So that would definitely be wrong. And yeah, she's taken a vow of celibacy, so she shouldn't be misbehaving, yo. Her heart belongs to a dead guy. Pietro Crispi, who she rejected because he rejected her. Kind of, what's it called? Like, immature, if you ask me. But love's like that sometimes. Okay, she tried not to become separated from Remedios the beauty. She was ashamed of the blush that covered her cheeks on the day her nephew asked her how long she intended wearing the black bandage on her hand, for she interpreted it as an allusion to her virginity. When he arrived, she barred the door of her bedroom, but she heard his peaceful snoring in the next room for so many nights that she forgot about the precaution. Early one morning, almost 2 months after his return, she heard him come into the bedroom. Then instead of fleeing, instead of shouting, as she had thought she would, she let herself be saturated with the soft feeling of relaxation. Oh, this doesn't sound good. Let's see. Remedios the beauty is see, what relation is that to her? Is that her granddaughter? It would be her. It wouldn't be her granddaughter since Amaranta doesn't actually have kids. It would be her like great niece, I think. Yeah. So her mom, her nephew. Yeah, another one of her nephews. The one who wasn't trying to have sex with her. Okay, who is now passed away from political upheaval. Okay. She felt him slipping under the mosquito netting as he had done when he was a child, as he had always done. She could not repress her cold sweat and the chattering of her teeth when she realized that he was completely naked. Go away, she whispered, suffocating with curiosity. Go away or I'll scream. But Aureliano Jose knew then what he had to do, because he was no longer a child but a barracks animal. Starting with that night, the dull, inconsequential battles began again and would go on until dawn. I'm your aunt, Amaranta murmured, spent. It's almost as if I were your mother, not just because of my age, but because the only thing I didn't do for you was nurse you. Is it Santa Sofia de la... No, his mom is Pilar. Right, Pilar Turner. Again, I have to keep looking at the family chart. It's just stuff's confusing as heck. Let's see. His I believe his grandma's Pilar, if I'm not mistaken. Wait, no, this is Aureliano Jose. So his mom was Remedios. Wait, no, sorry. Yeah, his mom is Pilar Turner. Yeah, when in doubt, their mom is Pilar. Like, if you're in doubt, your mom is Pilar Turner. Like, seriously, she has so many kids, it's like hard to keep track. It's like contribute to global warming. Okay. Yeah, and Ursula would be his grandma, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, and where is Pilar in all of this? I don't know. And who's the one who is Arcadio? Yeah, she had Pilar has already had Arcadio and Aureliano Jose. So yeah. Aureliano would escape at dawn and come back early in the morning on the next day, each time more excited by the proof that she had not barred the door. Why that's even necessary, I don't really know. Pilar and his dad is Colonel Aureliano. Yeah, Colonel Aureliano Jose, right? Is that his name? No, it's Colonel Aureliano Buendia. Yeah, Colonel Aureliano Buendia is his dad, and who knows where he is. Trying to avoid getting shot, I think, somewhere. He had not stopped desiring her for a single instant. He found her in the dark bedrooms of captured towns, especially in the most abject ones, and he would make her materialize in the smell of in the instantaneous terror of the danger of death in all places. He had fled from her in an attempt to wipe out her memory, not only through distance, but by means of a muddled fury that his companions at arms took to be boldness. But the more her image wallowed in the dunghill of the war resembled Amaranta. That was how he suffered in exile, looking for a way of killing her with his own death. Till he heard some old man tell the tale of a man who had married his aunt, who was also his cousin, and whose son ended up being his own grandfather. What? I don't get it at all. I think Gabriel Garcia Marquez is making some commentary about incest here, but I don't know what it means. Can a person marry his own aunt? He asked, startled. He not only can do that, the soldier answered him, but we're fighting this war against the priests so that a person can marry his own mother. I don't know why you'd want to fight for that, but and wait, these are the liberals. They're even more radicalized than real liberals are. 2 weeks later, he deserted. He found Amaranta more withered than in his memory, more melancholy and shy, and now really turning the last corner of maturity, but more feverish than ever in the darkness of her bedroom and more challenging than ever in the aggressiveness of her resistance. You're a brute, Amaranta would tell him as she was harried by his hounds. You can't do that to a poor aunt unless you have a special dispensation from the Pope. Aureliano Jose promised to go to Rome. He promised to go across Europe on his knees to kiss the sandals of the pontiff, just so that she would lower her drawbridge. It's not just that, Amaranta retorted. Any children will be born with the tail of a pig. Aureliano Jose was deaf to all arguments. I don't care if they're born as armadillos, he begged. Early one morning, vanquished by the unbearable pain of repressed virility, he went to Caterino's. He found a woman with flaccid breasts, affectionate and cheap, who calmed his stomach for some time. He would see her on the porch working at the sewing machine with admirable skill. He would not even speak to her. Amaranta felt freed of a reef, and she herself did not understand why she started thinking again at that time about Colonel Herrineldo Marquez. Why she remembered with such nostalgia the afternoons of Chinese checkers, and why she even desired him as the man in her bedroom. She wants what she prevents herself. She's just like a very kind of tragic character. Like in some ways, she's even more tragic than Remedios, who she poisoned. Like she's got like a black hole kind of like she cannot be loved, even though she needs love. She like can't have it. She denies herself that. Much to like everyone else's torment and suffering, including hers. Like no one's having a good time. Okay. Aureliano Jose did not realize how much ground he had lost on the night he could no longer bear the farce of indifference and went back to Amaranta's room. She rejected him with an inflexible and unmistakable determination. She barred the door of her bedroom forever. A few months after the return of Aureliano Jose, an exuberant woman perfumed with jasmine appeared at the house with a boy, about 5. She stated that he was the son of Colonel Aureliano Buendia and that she had brought him to Ursula to be baptized. No one doubted the origins of that name. At the time, he was taken to see ice for the first time. This would be Jose Aureliano's brother, if that's the case. Yes. So this 5-year-old boy is Aureliano Jose's brother. The woman said that he'd been born with his eyes open, looking at people with the judgment of an adult, and that she was frightened by his way of staring at things without blinking. He's identical, Ursula said. The only thing missing is for him to make chairs rock by simply looking at them. They christened him Aureliano, because that's not confusing, with his mother's last name, since the law did not permit a person to bear his father's name until he had recognized him. General Moncada was the godfather, although Amaranta insisted that he be left so that she could take over his upbringing. His mother was against it. Okay, yeah, so now there's 3 Aurelianos. There's Colonel Aureliano Buendia, there's Aureliano Jose, and there is now this Aureliano. And what's interesting is that brothers. So it's Jose Aureliano and Aureliano, because that's not going to be confusing at all. Ursula at the time did not know about the custom of sending virgins to the bedrooms of soldiers in the same way that hens are turned loose with fine roosters. But in the course of that year, she found out. 9 more sons of Colonel Aureliano Buendia were brought to the house to be baptized. All right, hold up. Was it in chapter 6? Maybe it was chapter 5. One of the characters had like many kids. Who was that? Was it Colonel Aureliano Buendia? And most of them died. Yeah, so Aureliano is kind of like Pilar. Like, he just keeps having kids. Like in chapter 6, it's revealed that he fathers 17 sons. Chapter alone, by the way. So now he's up to 20, if I'm not mistaken, counting Jose Aureliano. Aureliano Jose, Aureliano, the younger brother, and now this new boy. Oh, sorry, these 9 more boys. I don't know. How many even is that? 9 and 2 is 11. 11 and 17 is 28. He's had 28 boys. Like, I don't even know. 28 kids and they're all boys. That's got to be some sort of record. Like, I don't even think that's possible. The oldest, estranged dark boy with green eyes, who was not at all like his father's family, was over 10 years old. They brought children of all ages, all colors, but all males and all with the look of solitude that left no doubt as to their relationship. Wow. Only 2 stood out in the group. One large for his age and made smithereens out of the flower pots and china because his hands seemed to have the property of breaking everything they touched. The other was a blond boy with the same light eyes as his mother, whose hair had been left to grow long and curly like that of a woman. He entered the house with a great deal of familiarity, as if he had been raised there, and he went directly to a chest in Ursula's bedroom and demanded, "I want the mechanical ballerina." Ursula was startled. She opened the chest, searched among the ancient and dusty articles left from the days of Melchiades, and wrapped in a pair of stockings she found the mechanical ballerina that Pietro Crispi had brought to the house once and that everyone had forgotten about. I think in a way it's representing the cyclical nature of time, because I believe that Melchiades will be making another resurrection soon. He's come back from the dead one time already. He's existed twice, died twice, and I believe he'll be coming back. Even the memories themselves are cyclical. Like, this boy couldn't have known about that doll, but it's the same toy that I think his father played with at some point. The Pietro Crispi brought from Italy. In less than 12 years, they baptized with the name Aureliano and the last name of the mother, all the sons that the colonel had implanted up and down his theater of war. 17. First, Ursula would fill their pockets with money, and Amaranta tried to have them stay. But they finally limited themselves to giving them presents and serving as godmothers. We've done our duty by baptizing them, Ursula would say, jotting down in a ledger the name and address of the mother and the place and date of birth of the child. Aureliano needs well-kept accounts so that he can decide things when he comes back. During lunch, commenting with General Moncada about that disconcerting proliferation, she expressed the desire for Colonel Aureliano Buendia to come back someday and gather all of his sons together in the house. Don't worry, dear friend, General Moncada said enigmatically. He'll come sooner than you suspect. What General Moncada knew and what he did not wish to reveal at lunch was that Colonel Aureliano Buendia was already on his way to head up the most prolonged, radical, and bloody rebellion of all those he had started up until then. Yeah, it's like he's taken the place of Jose Arcadio as like the cowboy. Like, because before, yeah, it was Jose Arcadio. Yeah, and now it's him. Yeah, at first it was like the Arcadios variety, and now it's like the Aurelianos are going to be that way. And is it just me, or are all the men in this book stupid jerks? Like, is that, like, at some point, like, I think Pietro Crispi was okay for a while, but like everyone else, well, and then Jose Arcadio Buendia he was also okay, but he was tied to a tree for like half the book. Let's see, where am I? He had to head up a bloody rebellion. The situation again became as tense as it had been during the months that preceded the First War. The cockfights instituted by the mayor himself were suspended. Captain Aquiles Ricardo, commander of the garrison, took over the exercise of municipal power. Liberals looked upon him as a provocateur. Something terrible is going to happen, Ursula would say to Aureliano Jose. Don't go out into the street after 6 o'clock. The treaties were useless. Aureliano Jose, just like Arcadio and other times, had ceased to belong to her. Again, like, just now the Aurelianos are becoming like the Arcadio place. Since all of them have passed away, someone has to like take their place now. It was as if his return home, the possibility of existing without concerning himself with everyday necessities, had awakened in him the lewd and lazy leanings of his uncle, Jose Arcadio. It's like history's repeating itself in the next generation. Which is kind of strange because they would be like cousins. Not quite like cousins. Jose Arcadio would be his uncle. That would be his uncle. His cousin would be Arcadio. His passion for Amaranta had been extinguished without leaving any scars. Good, because that was pretty stinking disturbing. Too, with occasional women sacking the hiding places where he ended up coming home only to change his clothes. They're all alike, Ursula lamented. Well, that's because they're all related to you. Did you ever think about that? At first, they behave very well. They're obedient and prompt, and they don't seem capable of killing a fly, but as soon as their beards appear, they go to ruin. Unlike Arcadio, who had never known his real origins, he is in fact a Buendia. So he didn't know who his grandfather was. He found out that he was the son of Pilar Ternera, who had hung up a hammock so that he could take his siesta in her house. Uh, who's this again? Jose Aureliano? Or what is it? Aureliano Jose? Yeah, it's Aureliano Jose. Yeah, correct. His mom is Pilar Ternera. Arcadio was also the son of. Yeah, and no one was ever married, I think, to Pilar Ternera. Yeah. More more than mother and son, they were accomplices in Solitude. Ooh, Ursula and Jose. Aureliano Jose? Yeah, I guess. Pilar Ternera had lost the trail of all hope. Okay, maybe, yeah, Pilar Ternera and Aureliano Jose. Her laugh had taken on the tones of an organ. Her breast had succumbed to the tedium of endless caressing. Her stomach and her thighs had been the victims of her irrevocable fate as a shared woman. But her heart grew old without bitterness. Fat, talkative, with the airs of a matron in disgrace, she renounced the sterile illusions of her cards and found peace and consolation in other people's loves. Now, yes, I just please don't have any more kids. For the love of God, please refrain. In the house where Aurelian Jose took his siesta, the girls from the neighborhood would receive their casual lovers. "Lend me your room, Pilar," they would simply say inside. "Of course," Pilar would answer. If anyone was present, she would explain. "I'm happy knowing that people are happy in bed." She never charged for the service. She never refused the favor, just as she never refused the countless men who sought her out. Maturity, without giving her money or love, pleasure. Only occasionally pleasure. Her 5 daughters, who inherited a burning seed, had been lost on the byways of life since adolescence. Yeah, they're never. They're like Aureliano's. Colonel Aureliano Buendia's sons. It's like they're never really given. Of the 2 sons she managed to raise, one died Buendia, and the other was wounded and captured at the age of 14 when he tried to steal a crate of chickens in a town in the swamp. In a certain way, Aureliano Jose was the tall, dark man who had been promised her for half a century by the King of Hearts, and like all men sent by the cards, he reached her heart when he was already stamped with the mark of death. She saw in the cards. "Don't go out tonight," she told him. "Stay and sleep here because Carmelita Montiel is getting tired of asking me to put her in your room." Aureliano Jose did not catch the deep feelings of begging that was in the offer. "Tell her to wait for me at midnight," he said. He went to the theater where a Spanish company was putting on The Dagger of the Fox, which was really Zorrilla's play with the title changed by order of Captain Aquiles Ricardo because the liberals called the conservatives Goths. Only when he handed in his ticket at the door did Aureliano Jose realize that Captain Aquiles Ricardo and the 2 soldiers armed with rifles were searching the audience. Aureliano Jose warned him. "The man hasn't been born yet who can lay hands on me." Captain tried to search him forcibly, and Aureliano Jose, who was unarmed, began to run. Soldiers disobeyed. One of them explained. Along with rage, the captain then snatched away the rifle, stepped into the center of the street, and took aim. "Cowards!" he shouted. "I only wish it was Colonel Aureliano Buendia." Yeah, if you could finally shoot him. endless supply of kids. Carmelita Montiel, a 20-year-old virgin, had just bathed in orange blossom water and was large near his bed when the shot rang out. And to find with her the happiness that Amaranta had denied him, to have 7 children and to die in her arms of old age. But the bullet that entered his back and shattered his chest had been directed by a wrong interpretation of the cards. Captain Aquiles Ricardo, who was really the one destined to die that night, did indeed die 4 hours before Aureliano Jose. As soon as the shot was heard, he was brought down by 2 simultaneous bullets whose origin was never established, and a shout of many voices shook the night. Much like Jose Arcadio. It's never really revealed who shot him. Long live the Liberal Party. Long live Colonel Aureliano Buendia. 12 o'clock when Aureliano Jose had bled to death, and Carmelita Montiel found the cards showing her future were blank. That's not a good sign. More than 400 men had filed past the theater and discharged their revolvers into the abandoned body of Captain Aquiles Ricardo. Patrol had to use a wheelbarrow to carry the body, which was heavy with lead and fell apart like a water-soaked loaf of bread. Annoyed by the outrages of the regular army, General Jose influence put on his uniform again and assumed the military leadership of Macondo. He did not expect, however, that his conciliatory attitude would be able to prevent the inevitable. The news in September announced that it was maintaining control throughout the country. News of armed uprisings in the interior. The regime would not admit a state of war until it was proclaimed in a decree that it had followed a court-martial which had condemned Colonel Aureliano Buendia to death in absentia. The first unit that captured him was ordered to carry the sentence out. This means he's come back, Ursula said joyfully to General Moncada, but he himself knew nothing about it. Actually, Colonel Aureliano Buendia had been in the country for more than a month. He was preceded by conflicting rumors, supposed to be in the most distant places at the same time. Even General Moncada did not believe in his return until it was officially announced that he had seized 2 states on the coast. Congratulations, dear friend, he told Ursula, showing her the telegram. You'll soon have him here. Ursula was worried then for the first time. And what will you do? She asked. General Moncada had asked himself that same question many times. The same as he, my friend, he answered. I'll do my duty. At dawn on the 1st of October, Colonel Aureliano Buendia attacked Macondo with 1,000 well-armed men, and the garrison received orders to resist to the end. At noon, while General Macondo was lunching with Ursula, a rebel cannon shot that echoed in the whole town blew the front of the municipal treasury to dust. They're as well armed as we are, General Moncada sighed. But besides that, they're fighting because they want to. Is anyone conscripted? Is anyone fighting because they do not want to? At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, while the earth trembled with the artillery fire from both sides, he took leave of Ursula with the certainty that he was fighting a losing battle. Pray to God that you won't have Aureliano in the house tonight, he said. If it does happen that way, give him an embrace for me, because I don't expect ever to see him again. What does he mean by Aureliano? Does he mean... I think he means Aureliano Jose's younger brother. I think that's who he means. Because there are 3 Jose and Aureliano, the younger brother, Aureliano Jose. I think that's who he means when he says Aureliano. If it does happen that way, give him an embrace from me, because he was captured when he tried to escape from Macondo after writing a long letter to Garcia, in which he reminded him of their common aim to humanize the war, and he wished him a final victory over the corruption of the militarists and the ambitions of the politicians of both parties. On the following day, Colonel Aureliano Ursula's house, where he was being held until a revolutionary court-martial finally gathering. But while the adversaries forgot the war to remember things of the past, Ursula had the gloomy feeling that her son was an intruder. She had felt it ever since she saw him come in protected by a noisy military retinue, which turned the bedrooms inside out until they were convinced there was no danger. Colonel Aureliano Buendia not only accepted it, but he gave strict orders that no one should come closer than 10 feet. Not even Ursula, while the members of his escort finished placing guards about the house. It's kind of like Al Pacino in the movie Scarface. Like, he was wearing an ordinary denim uniform with no insignia of any kind and had high boots on with spurs that were caked with mud and dried blood. On his waist, he wore a holster with the flap open, and his hand, which was always on the butt of the pistol, revealed the same watchful and resolute tension as his look. His head was a slow oven. His face, tanned by the salt of the Caribbean, he was preserved against imminent old age by a vitality that had something to do with the coldness of his insides. He was taller than when he had left, paler and bonier, and he showed the first symptoms of resistance to nostalgia. Good Lord, her soul said to herself. Now he looks like a man capable of anything. He was. The Aztec shawl that he brought Amaranta. The remembrances he spoke of at lunch. The funny stories he told were simple leftovers from his humor of a different time. I'm kind of sad that he moved on from Remedios. Like, that's probably one of the saddest things in this book, is that he wasn't more like Amaranta in some ways. It's like her death didn't really affect him because he's willing to like father all these other kids. Like he didn't really he just moved on. As soon as the order to bury the dead in a common grave was carried out, he assigned Colonel Roque Carnicer the mission of setting up court-martials, who went ahead with the exhausting task of imposing radical reforms, which would now leave a stone of the re-established conservative regime in place. Unsurprising. We had to get ahead of the politicians in the party, he said to the aides. When they open their eyes to reality, they'll find accomplished facts. It was then that he decided to review the titles to land and went back 100 years ago and discovered the legalized outrages of his brother Jose Arcadio. He annulled the registrations with the stroke of the pen. As a last gesture of courtesy, he left his affairs for an hour and visited Rebecca to bring her up to date on what he was determined to do. Yeah, we haven't heard from Rebecca in a long time. Ever since Jose Arcadio died, I'm pretty sure. Wait, is it Jose Arcadio or Arcadio Jose? Jose Arcadio. Is it Jose or is it Arcadio Arcadio? Of her house, the solitary widow who at one time who had been the loves and whose persistence had saved his life was a specter out of the past. Encased in black down to her knuckles, with her heart turned to ash, she scarcely knew anything about the war. Colonel Aureliano Buendia had the impression that the phosphorescence of her bones was showing through her skin, and that she moved in an atmosphere of St. Elmo's fire, and stagnant air, where one could still note a hidden smell of gunpowder. He began by advising her to moderate the rigor of her mourning, to ventilate the house, to forgive the world for the death of Jose Arcadio. But Rebecca was already beyond any vanity. After searching for it uselessly in the taste of earth, in the perfumed letters from Pietro Crispi, in the tempestuous bed of her husband, she had found peace in that house where memories materialized through the strength of implacable application. Implacable, unable to be placated. And walk like human beings through the cloistered rooms. Yeah, pretty sad how she did Pietro Crispi. Like, she's not the only Buendia who screwed over Pietro Crispi. Leaning back in her rocking chair, looking at Colonel he were the one who looked like a ghost out of the past. He was not even upset by the news that the lands usurped by Jose Arcadio will be returned to their rightful owners. Whatever you decide will be done, Aureliano. And now I have proof that you're a renegade. I think your dead husband, was a real renegade. The revision of the deeds. Like, he was such a renegade, he's dead now. The revision of the deeds took place at the same time as the summary court-martial presided over by Colonel Herrinaldo Marquez, which ended with the execution of all officers of the regular army who'd been taken prisoner by the revolutionaries. And by the way, Colonel Aureliano, was it Colonel Aureliano Buendia? Yeah. Colonel Aureliano Buendia has survived like multiple assassination attempts. He's the guy who was not executed by a firing squad because they were afraid of the like public response to his death. So yeah, he pretty much is a ghost from the past. Like, this guy's like evaded. He's like cheated death like probably more times than anyone else in the novel at this point. The last court martial was that of Jose Raquel Moncada. Ursula intervened. His government was the best. I don't have to tell you anything about his good heart, about his affection for her. Colonel Aureliano Buendia gave her a disapproving look. I can't take over the job of administering justice, he replied. If you have something to say, tell it to the court martial. Ursula not only did that, she also brought all the mothers of the revolutionary officers who lived in Macondo to testify. One by one, the old women who had been founders of the town, several whom had taken part in the daring crossing of the mountains, praised the virtues of General Moncada. Ursula was the last in line. Her gloomy dignity, the weight of her name, the convincing vehemence of justice hesitate for a moment. You've taken this horrible done very well because you're doing your duty. You've done well because you're doing your duty, she told the members of the court. But don't forget that as long as God gives us life, we'll still be mothers, and no matter how revolutionary you may be, we have the right to pull down your pants and give you a whipping at the first sign of disrespect. Ursula, ever the, what do you call it, like, the mother, like, she's pretty much the grandmother of, or the great grandmother of every stinking character in this book, with the exception of Pilar Ternera and Rebecca, of course. And yeah, the Crispies. Court retired to deliberate as those words still echoed in the school that had been turned into a barracks. At midnight, General Jose Raquel Moncada was sentenced to death. Colonel Aureliano Buendia, in spite of the violent recriminations of Ursula, refused to commute the sentence. A short while before dawn, he visited the condemned man in the room he used as a cell. Remember, old friend, he told him, I'm not shooting you. It's the revolution that's shooting you. General Moncada did not even. Go to hell, friend, he answered. Till that moment, ever since his return, Colonel Aureliano Buendia had not given himself the opportunity to see him with his heart. He was startled to see how much he had aged, how his hands shook. The rather another word I need to make sure I'm saying correctly. Punctilious. Punctilious.
Punctilious.
Yes, punctilious. Thank you. Showing great attention to detail or correct behavior. Punctilious conformity with which he awaited death. And then he felt a great disgust with himself, which he mingled with the beginnings of pity. Yeah, I mean, he was a good ruler, General. What's his name? General Moncada. Yeah, he was a good ruler. Like, I don't know why he would have any remorse. Like, if anyone deserves to die here, it's Colonel Aureliano Buendia, Colonel Aureliano. You know better than I, he said, that farces and that you're really paying for the crimes of the people. Because this time we're going to win the war at any price. Wouldn't you have done the same in my place? General Moncada got up to clean his thick, horn-rimmed glasses on his shirt tail. Probably, he said. What worries me is not your shooting me, because after all, for people like us, it's a natural death. He laid his glasses on the bed and took off his watch and chain. What worries me, he went on, is that out of so much hatred for the military, out of fighting them so much and thinking about them so much, you ended up as bad as they are. Pretty much. It can't possibly get better from a condo after this. No ideal in life is worth that much baseness. He took off his wedding ring and the medal of the Virgin of Health and put them alongside his glasses and watch. At this rate, he concluded, you'll not only be the most despotic and bloody dictator in history, but you'll shoot my dear friend Ursula in an attempt to pacify your conscience. That is his mother, by the way. Like, you'd be killing his mom in that case. But by this point, he might have, again, confused lineage. He might have forgotten who his mom is. It has been years that he's been, like, literally roaming the countryside, fighting random guerrilla battles in the jungle or, whatever. Just like full-on cowboy status. And yeah, I'm pretty sure history is going to repeat itself again, and he's going to be a ruler just like Arcadia was. Yeah, we'll see if General Moncada's prediction comes true. I'm pretty sure it will, though. Colonel Aureliano Buendia stood there impassively. General Moncada then gave him the glasses, medal, watch, and ring and changed his tone. But I didn't send for you to scold you, he said. I wanted to ask you the favor of sending these things to my wife. Colonel Aureliano Buendia put them in his pockets. Is she still a Manar? She's still a Manar, General Moncada confirmed. In the same house behind the church where you sent the letter. I'll be glad to, Jose Raquel, Colonel Aureliano Buendia said. When he went out into the blue air of the mist, his face grew damp as on some other dawn in the past. And only then did he realize that he had ordered the sentence to be carried out in the courtyard and not at the cemetery wall. The firing squad drawn up state. They can bring him out now, he ordered. It's a shame. There was a point in this novel when Aureliano Buendia was sympathetic. He was a sympathetic character. And he's just turned into a guy from a firing squad at this point. Like he might have been a revolutionary hero at some point, but now he's just like the military he was trying to stop. Just like General Moncada said. So we'll have to see if he gets his comeuppance at some point, either by the same people he was trying to protect, or by yet another revolutionary who's trying now. The endless cycle, power and revenge, swirling like a giant toilet of politics and ideologies. But that will be in the next chapter, maybe. 100 Years of Solitude. Okay. Thank you for watching.